Hello and welcome to Finding Your Collaborative Edge, the podcast for leaders, teams and professionals who want to unlock the full potential of collaboration in their organisations and lives. Hosted by Anni Townend and Lucy Kidd, together with our guests we explore the essential elements of psychological safety, inclusive dialogue and diversity of thought and feeling, helping you cultivate a mindset of curiosity, care and courage, leading to collaborative edge. In today's episode, we are delighted to be in conversation with James Renwick, Recast Coaching, and Tony Spong, Lead Consultant at AAR. Welcome, James. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Well, we're very much looking forward to exploring what collaboration means to you, for you, and how you collaborate with each other. But firstly, we'd like to know something about who you are and how you met and how you've been working together.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Lucy. AAR are marketing consultants to the whole industry, so we look after the whole spectrum. And we collaborate a lot with both brand side marketing and agency side and supplier side marketing. And I've been there a long time. And part of the reason I'm been there that long is I'm very curious and there's lots of collaborations. So I feel I'm going to really enjoy today's session. James and I met probably 15 odd years ago when he was at the National Maritime Museum, where we collaborated together on a project. And then, as luck would have it, a few years later when he was at Macmillan, we worked together again then. And we're about to start on another venture with you two as well. So very excited and great timing to be here today.
Absolutely. Lovely. James.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Tony. 15 years, wow. My name is James and I describe myself as a thinking partner and coach and founder of Recast Coaching, and work with leaders individually, as groups and as teams, to better the work that they do and sometimes to better the life that they lead as well. It's been lovely to collaborate with Tony for quite so long and to evolve our collaboration and relationship more recently in terms of one-to-one coaching with AAR and some leadership training, and now something that feels even richer, which we might talk about later. So delighted to be here today. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you both.
It's great to be in conversation together. One of the things we'd love to explore with you is what you really mean by collaboration. And one of the questions we ask everyone we're in conversation with is, what does true collaboration really mean?
I think for me, true collaboration involves a shared purpose and vision, and perhaps putting individual interests and sometimes egos to one side. There's a feeling when collaboration is working well, for me, which is exciting. It feels connected and there's an energy. And I'm a big believer that how we feel profoundly influences how we behave and how we perform. So there's a kind of lovely virtuous circle in collaboration with me. Not only do I believe it often gets to better business outcomes and results, but we have more fun when we do it too.
Thank you. Love that description of the feeling of it. Often we talk about perhaps the practicalities or the conditions or the environment, but yeah, the feeling can be the difference that it makes to really collaborate and to find that collaborative edge together. Tony, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up on James's point about the emotional side. When I started at AAR, one of the first projects I worked on was with a brand looking for a specific type of partner in the marketing world. We don't need to go into the detail of it. Going in, I thought it was going to be a very rational decision. I thought this is very important. There's lots of money involved. Someone would have a scorecard, a tick list, and they'd actually put their, if you like, game face on in that sense. How wrong was I? When the client in question picked up just a piece of collateral and said, this agency feels most like us. And my head exploded with excitement on the one hand and just unbelievably curious about where does this emotion fit into decision making. So to James's point about how does it feel when you're working together is massively important and quite often not captured, not thought of. For me, the environment of collaboration is absolutely key to getting it right and to get it productive. Otherwise, it can dissipate, and there are numbers of projects that might start but never finish because of that. And the sustainability of a collaboration is one of the hardest things. And I think how you go into these things is so important. But for me, a lot of the excitement is at the beginning about, I don't know what we're going to collaborate on. And you spend your life picking up crumbs and you don't know whether they're going to come to anything and grow into something. And that's the excitement that we bump into, as we four have done. 2 thought starters from different genesis came together and we made 5 out of 2 plus 2. And that's when it starts, that's when the emotion for me really starts to kick in. And then, yes, we've got to plan it and map it out. But collaboration is, for me, that beginning to say we've got something that we want to collaborate on.
What sparked your curiosity was collaborative edge, the edge. And it would be lovely to hear more from both of you about why collaborative edge sparked your curiosity and had you want to collaborate with us more.
For me, edge involves a sense of uniqueness in terms of what we bring and what we offer. That uniqueness can be achieved through the culmination of showing an interest and getting comfortable with not knowing the answer or where the conversation or where the collaboration might take us. And trying to resist the temptation to offer advice or opinion. And then care. You talk about care being so important in terms of providing the conditions where people feel safe and able to do their best thinking from a place of presence and resourcefulness, as opposed to this state of fear and activation, which many of us are leading through at the moment. And courage. Mm-hmm. When we're able to provide the conditions of curiosity and care, I think it enables people to be more courageous, maybe to speak out against injustice or when behaviours fall short of what's expected, maybe simply just to speak up in a meeting. So for me, the edge is almost the culmination of all those 3 conditions, which then allows us to be the best that we can be individually, but more importantly than that, collectively.
The things that popped into my head when I heard edge got me curious. There were 2 thoughts. One is the sharpness of an edge, as in a knife, which meant that it could be used to cut through, to create something, to clear out, to tidy up, to get rid of. There was that aspect to it. And then the other side of edge is the I don't know what's beyond it, and the curiosity to explore. So setting up that dynamic of an edge had 2 big things in my head. One is that it would produce something productive and useful because it had the blade aspect. But the other aspect for me was I want to go on that journey to discover, and that the curiosity gets the better of me in that. And my next door neighbour, when I was a kid growing up, looking back at it, he never slapped it down. I had a phrase that came back to haunt me on birthdays and things like that when my next door neighbour would describe what I was like as a child. And I used to say, "Why for you do that, Uncle Derek?" And he didn't say, "Shut up," or whatever. He would explain things to me. So I've always held on to that. Why for you do that, Annie? Why for you do that? And that stayed with me and as a foundation to my curiosity. And that goes back to childhood and being encouraged to keep asking why.
I love that. And I think courage and encourage go together. That for courage to happen, we are encouraged by each other. And the mindset and behaviours of curiosity, care and courage, that underpin finding your collaborative edge. And we chose collaborative edge because of the pun on or spin on competitive edge, but also importantly from permaculture, that growth happens at the edges. And so it's interesting that you share a story about your neighbour and your Uncle Derek over the garden wall, but noticing that the edge of that garden wall, there would be more biodiversity, there would be more difference. And that played into our choosing to help people to find their collaborative edge rather than to find their competitive edge or competitive advantage. You talk about, Tony, in some of your work, collaborative advantage. And again, it would be great to hear from both of you what that means for you and what some of the challenges are to finding our collaborative edge when the environment is often one, whilst we talk about collaboration, it's actually one where there is naturally a lot of competition.
Yeah, I think that I've had a growing frustration with the word of late, because whilst I understand and accept and acknowledge and embrace the power of it, it's been overused to such an extent that it's lost its weight, it's lost its meaning. And at worst, it just means, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to have a chat. And it's way more powerful than that. And the day we devalue it, I think we lose a huge amount of ability to solve all sorts of problems. And it loses the acknowledgement of the need for diversity and conversation. It loses the power to be productive and constructive and blunts its edge. And that, for me, is something that needs to be looked at and perhaps put right. And that may mean that we have to reframe it in some way or not. And that's an exploration I'm keen to go on with you and others. Because ultimately, especially the world that we live in, never mind the specific part of the world that I occupy through work, etc., is that you can't gone are the days you can do things on your own. I read recently that over 90% of all the great ideas and inventions that we enjoy have all been created by groups of people coming together to solve, not individuals. Yes, 200, 300, 400 years ago, that was how it all started. But today, the sorts of complex problems we've got to solve, we need people, we need diversity, and we need to know how to collaborate. And if we don't do it well, too many good ideas won't make it out the other end, and that would be tragic.
And I think that's why we always start with psychological safety, creating that safe environment in which people can enjoy inclusive dialogue and are very conscious of the impact of the words that they use on each other in order to get to that diversity of thought and feeling. We often talk about diversity of thought, but Lucy and I realised that it's about diversity of thought and diversity of feeling, being able to feel differently about a subject matter and being able to express that and be heard and met and valued for that diversity. And that through putting those things in place, psychological safety, inclusive dialogue, diversity of thought and feeling, then we can get to true collaborative edge. It doesn't happen without having to do some groundwork in order to be more creative, to deliver and drive business results. What about you, James, when you think about collaborative edge and collaboration?
It very much reminds me of the work from Nancy Klein. And her book from the late 90s called Time to Think is the book I wish I'd read earlier in my former
I wish I'd written
roles.
it.
And as well as being one of the leading authorities on listening well and listening with attention, she's created what she calls 10 components of a thinking environment. And it helps us think about how we condition the environment and experience where people are able to do their best thinking. And within that, she talks about attention, listening really well to understand, not just to think through our response, which we're all guilty of. But she talks about appreciation, the importance of the human mind requiring at least 5 bits of positive praise to 1 bit of more challenging feedback, and many other evidence sources cite 3-1. And she talks about encouragement, to give courage to venture to the edge of our thinking, where we cease competition, we stop looking at each other as competitors. And one of my favourite components of hers, she calls equality, and that language has moved on a lot since then. But within that, she says, even in a hierarchy, we're all equal as thinkers. We may not be equal as knowers, we all know different things, but in a thinking environment, we're all equal as thinkers. And therefore, everyone has a chance to have their voice heard, and everyone has a chance to give their full attention to others. I think we need more of that in the environments in which we work and the environments in which we live. And I think once we get that right, it really helps people to feel valued and feel listened to and feel heard and feel like they belong. And when we feel like we belong, then we're able to bring our best in terms of our performance, but also just an enjoyment of the time that we spend with others too. I take continued inspiration from that work, and it's really lovely to see how that thinking has evolved and different language comes into the work that you're now doing as part of a collaboration equation. I think the world needs more of that rather than less.
I think we do need more of it, because one of the things that I've noticed and we've noticed in our work is that creating a thinking environment and making it possible for people to do their best thinking together in the hybrid world in which many of us work, that there isn't time made for thinking time. And it's one of the reasons that we love and incorporate walking and talking into our work with leaders, to give people a chance maybe not to walk and talk, but to sit side by side together, to be outside and to have thinking time on their own, but also thinking time together in order to come together and, crucially, to do our best thinking together, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about finding your collaborative edge. It's finding the time, making the time to do our best thinking together and to hear from many, many different voices and to hear how people feel about things as well.
And to build on that, creating that sense of ease, which Nancy Klein talks about, that is free from rush and urgency. A condition for collaboration, to Tony's point, is that we have both time and space. And by space, I mean almost the feeling of ease, where we're not rushing or bouncing from one meeting to the next, where we allow the space and the time that's needed. And I think in my experience of collaboration, it's not the only solution. It's not always the right solution. But in order to get it right, we need to build that time in up front, because it takes longer. Undoubtedly, it takes longer to collaborate. My belief is it's worth it in the long term, but it's not the only option. And we don't always have the luxury of that time, particularly in the way that we're now working.
The challenge of time, I see it everywhere, and it manifests itself more and more. And some of that is because you notice it and therefore you focus on it. But the challenge of post-COVID in terms of how do I construct the environment of time and give people the courage to let go of the guilt of not being fully occupied all the time. And that is down to leadership as well. But there's something very odd when you think about it, how much time we waste by using up time, if you know what I mean. We're back-to-back meetings and something. We feel we can't exist. But at the same time, we've got to recreate. I'm not saying we should all go back to the office or whatever, but whatever the environment we create for best collaboration, we need to think about how we construct it today. I mean, it was simpler when you're all in the office to some extent. I would deliberately find a desk near the water cooler, and I would have lots of conversations and connections so that when something came up that maybe I needed to collaborate with someone, I already knew who it was because I'd already met them at the water cooler. I would also move to the kitchen at coffee break, and especially when I was in an office where you had a bit of hybrid working, and they would all arrive roughly at the same time off the trains and buses and things. And they'd all gather in the kitchen. So I thought, I've got to be there. I've got to find out what's going on. So how do you create that again? Its value is well known, but I think we've struggled to create as much time and space for those things. James and I were chatting on the train coming down. In nature, it's the equivalent of that bit of the garden or the bit of the field that you let go for rewilding. And I think we need to rewild some time that allow a slow hunch to appear, that allows someone to connect and build a collaborative construct that says, should we take this further? Should we build on this? But it's got to start somewhere, and some seed has to find a home in the corner of the field in order to become a flower. And you've got to give, you can't just dig it over and that seed's lost then and nothing will happen. So we've got to find that rewilding element of our environment and our time somehow.
I think we do. It was one of the 5 things that have been identified as key things for marketers and marketing leaders by Accenture, who've done some research. They do it every year. And they actually have a name for it, social rewilding. That's what we need. It's one of the 5 things that we need to pay attention to and make time for. And I think Lucy and I, we've created curiosity, care and courage, the combination of the mindset and behaviours that help people to do that and to pay attention to that. So in the busyness of having a meeting and finding ourselves getting stuck into the business of the meeting, that if we make time in order to check in with each other with curiosity, care and courage, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it comes through really being present to each other, really listening, really that feeling that we talk about of being well met by each other and creating the environment where people do feel well met, they feel valued, they feel respected.
And also feel able to bring a different view or a different feeling. So we started this conversation by, James, you exploring that you feel it when there's an opportunity for collaboration. It feels like a connection or a synergy or an energy. And when we're exploring collaborative edge and creating possibilities for collaborative edge, it's also around exploring different feelings and kind of inviting that challenge or inviting that difference and seeking it out. And it's why creating the safety, the psychological safety and the trust, knowing that I can give a very different view or ask a very challenging question and for that to still be well heard and well met and well received. And that we're ready to then go off and explore a whole new tangent together. That's where we can start to meet some of those edges, and sometimes there's some friction and some tension, and often there's some challenge and discomfort around that, and the invitation that we bring through collaboration equation, and particularly through bringing that curiosity, care and courage together and noticing that we need all 3 of them together. And if just one is missing, the trust drops, the opportunity to find our edges drops, or might be missed. That one idea, that one seed that could really be the fertile idea for innovation, creativity, the next big thing, gets missed.
In the group coaching work I do particularly, we meet as humans. You know, this idea that you can't be a great leader unless you're a great human first and foremost. So this work in leadership starts with ourselves, and to make time and space, even if it's just a couple of minutes at the beginning of meetings, to check in with each other. You know, how are you doing? What perhaps are you bringing to this meeting that you need to let go of? Or how present do you want to be in this meeting even? And therefore, what adjustments can you make in order to achieve that? To just allow that time up front is time well spent, because what it means is you get a much richer conversation built on a foundation of trust and human to human connection, as opposed to what can sometimes feel rushed and transactional when we're all just being ripped from one meeting to the next without any time to pause for breath between them. And I love the way that you both allow people to feel well met by giving them a chance to introduce themselves fully. There's a lovely exercise that I experienced first with you, Annie, which is inviting people to share the story of their name.
Yeah, I love it.
And in doing so, you learn so much more from that person than you would simply by reading out their role, their job description and why they're here. So for me, meeting as humans, creating spaces where we connect as humans first and foremost is absolutely critical to working well together and therefore collaborating too.
I think as well as that checking in, however, and whichever way we do it, we also make time towards the end of whatever work we're doing with a team and or with a group to check out. So you will have also experienced that with us, where we will always begin something with a word, or as you've mentioned, for a first time sharing something about who you are through your name, encouraging people to share their story, something about themselves. But then at the end, one will always allow time to finish, and finish ahead of the hour.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, we know from experience that people will already be thinking about their next thing, and or we're not respecting their time and the fact that they've got something else. So we're noticing and paying attention to, we're coming to the close of the meeting, and therefore building in an opportunity to share possibly one word. How are you feeling at the end of this meeting? So we're already, we hope, setting people up to feel good about the next thing that they're going to, so that they're going into something with that kind of energy, and hopefully we'll make time to create that with the people that they're with.
I think the thing I'm keen to explore is, if I've got this sense that it's not working as productively as it could do we reduce the amount of collaboration we do in order to concentrate into if you like, a jus rather than a watery gravy, in the sense that people then really get a better insight into what true collaboration is, and therefore other things are just meetings or moments of coordination or cooperation or something else, and that we really re-embed the value of collaboration by starting smaller and tighter, in the same way that, you know, you might plant something in the corner of your garden that then begins to flourish and becomes stronger and more vibrant and dominant, but in the nice way, in that you go, actually, that's now a feature. Maybe that's a better way of, so that you've created a feature, and then people can stand back and admire it and you go, well, let's do that again. And where should we do it next time? Should we do it over there or over here, and things like that? So there's a part of where I'm at on collaboration at the moment is going backwards to come forwards, and and that's what I'm keen to explore with you and others over the coming months, about what do people feel about that? Can we move faster than that, or is that only one way of many that we find how to kind of sort of kickstart it?
I think it is important to differentiate when we are choosing to collaborate, when we might be choosing to coordinate an activity, or when we're choosing to cooperate on something. I think compete on something is another dimension. And I know your colleague, Vicky Gillen, she has taken that step further and highlighted the advantages of each of those forms of communication. But I think we believe that curiosity, care and courage underpin all forms of communication, and that if you bring that mindset and the behaviours of curiosity, care and courage, coordination when needed will flourish, cooperation will flourish, competition, healthy competition will flourish, because there is, and a word we haven't mentioned yet, there is trust between us. And the relational part of doing our work together is thriving. And through that, we become more creative and productive together.
I like the idea of knowers and thinkers. What do people know, and what do people think? And I think that's a very nice, neat and simple way of asking people how they can contribute.
And it encourages that curiosity. And we always start with curiosity when we're thinking about that element of choice, starting with a question around, is this a collaboration or is it a cooperation? Is it something else? Is it an instruction? Sometimes we need to instruct and direct, and do that with conscious choice. And curiosity helps to get us there, to that clear choice.
It's Vicky and I's favourite word, curiosity. So you'll hear a lot of that going forward.
Well, good, because years ago I remember reading an article and it was the number one thing that differentiated a great leader from a good leader was that they brought a passionate curiosity, not just in a thing, but a passionate curiosity in people.
Yeah.
And that starts with ourselves, you know, being curious about our own response to a situation as well as to other people's.
And our own impact.
We found it as it's the universal solvent equivalent.
I like that.
So like water, you know, it's the word that doesn't have a side to it, ironically, that when you talk to clients about it, they want that in agencies. And when agencies talk about clients, they want that in. It's a word that doesn't appear to have any baggage other than pure positivity in terms of, well, that's a great trait to have. And that's when Vicky and I had the evidence fed back to us that that's how that word was understood and used, then that became the centre point to build a number of other things around.
Children have an abundance of curiosity. I've got young people in my life. I saw a US study last year that suggested the average 4-year-old asks 200 questions a day.
Wow.
In my experience, most of those are the same question repeated. But what's so sad is that by the time they're leaving school, they're asking far fewer questions, because I think as a society, we're placing more value and importance on answers and solutions as opposed to questions. I wonder if it's also this idea that we think we might know the answers, this idea that we think we've already got the right solution that interferes with us staying curious, to just stay curious that bit longer, even if we think we might have the answer. And I wonder, for me, whether something that interferes with my curiosity is thinking that I know, and I often don't.
Something that has been present for me lately as we've been exploring how we really bring this to life for groups is to make that distinction between talking at or exploring with. And that really exploring ideas, concepts, questions together, and not knowing where the answers are going to come from, and being okay with the fact that they might not come from yourself. They might emerge from the group. We are nearing the end of our conversation together today. So, as your closing invitation to listeners and viewers, what are 3 things that you would like to leave people with, thinking about perhaps an invitation or a message to help them find their collaborative edge?
I think number one is be very clear about what collaboration means to you. And if you're in a leadership role, how is it going to contribute to the success of the group business that you're in? So I think really understand what it is and how you're going to use it for the greatest amount of value to your organisation. And that way I think we stand a chance of keeping it precious and valuable, which I'm getting a bit soapboxy about. The other one is the environment. Something's gone wrong in the environment, and there's elements that make up the environment. So not just the physical space, but the social space, the psychological space. I think you've got to create the right environment, be that in one meeting or lots of meetings or the whole project, whether it's large or small. And then perhaps just picking up on our last point about the culture in your organisation that gives everyone that sense of belonging and the energy that will create. You see it in team sports. You see teams that hold it together for a period of time and are very successful. They win this and that. So there is a competitive, ultimately, element to this, which is the success of your business, your enterprise, be that individual or collective. And that sense of belonging as part of that, I think, is where ultimately the value of being at the collaborative edge will manifest. So those are my 3 areas.
Thank you.
For now.
They're brewing.
Yes.
James, how about you?
2 of mine are perhaps conditions for achieving collaborative edge. Talk less, listen more, and really listening to understand rather than to think through how we might respond. And I keep coming back to this idea that we're all equal as thinkers. You know, that everyone has a right to be in that room And therefore, it's really important that we give everyone the platform to have their voice heard and to give our full attention to others. And then maybe my third point relates to the power of collaboration when it's the right solution, which is really that it will take longer, undoubtedly, and it will feel messy at times. But in my experience, it's often worth that in the long term, partly because of what we achieve together. You know, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, to something you said earlier, Tony, but also just the feeling that goes with it. I think when people feel like they're collaborating, they feel like they belong. And then they're able to bring their best as a result.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for collaborating with us today in this conversation. And for people who are listening would like to hear more about what you both do, how best, James, for people to get in touch with you?
Thanks, Annie. Always happy to connect with people and continue the conversation further. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or my website, so recastcoaching.co.uk.
Wonderful, thank you. And what about you, Tony?
Yes, no, again, LinkedIn, I'm there, Tony Spong.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both. And thank you to Brown Bear Studios for hosting this conversation. Thank you to Schmogus Media for helping us promote this conversation. And thank you to you, the listener, for listening. And if you would like to hear more about the work that Lucy and I do, please do go to our website, Collaboration Equation, and follow us on LinkedIn. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. And thank you for listening.